I'm Madison Grant, 32, a pediatric nurse. For 7 years, I believed I was the broken one, until I realized the real fractures ran much deeper, hidden in the tangled roots of my husband's family tree. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor the exact moment my mother-in-law's laughter cut through the anniversary party, like broken glass itself. I watched the golden liquid spread across the pristine white tiles, each droplet catching the chandelier light like tiny accusations, while Eleanor Grant's voice rose above the classical quartet. "Oh, Madison dear," she cooed to her circle of perfectly coiffed friends, her words dripping with practiced sympathy. "Still no little ones running around, I see. Some women just aren't built for motherhood, are they?" The scent of gardenias from the elaborate centerpieces suddenly felt suffocating. My fingers trembled as I bent to collect the larger shards, the sharp edges biting into my palm just enough to ground me in something real. Around me, the party continued its elegant dance, my husband David's family celebrating his parents' 40th wedding anniversary in their sprawling estate, while I bled quietly onto their imported marble. "Careful there," David's cousin Rebecca whispered, crouching beside me with a cocktail napkin. Her eyes held genuine concern, unlike the predatory gleam I'd grown accustomed to seeing at these gatherings. "You're shaking." I was. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of failed attempts, 7 years of Eleanor's increasingly pointed comments about my obvious inadequacies had worn me down to this, a woman picking up broken glass at a party where I'd never truly been welcome. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The classical quartet shifted into something minor and melancholy, the violin's cry seeming to echo my own silent screams. I could hear Eleanor's voice growing louder, more animated as she warmed to her favorite topic. David could have had anyone, you know. That lovely Patterson girl was absolutely smitten with him. Comes from good breeding stock. Her mother had 5 children, all healthy as horses. My chest tightened. The familiar burn of shame crept up my throat, but tonight something else flickered beneath it. Something harder. Something that had been building through countless family dinners where I sat at the children's table despite being 32, through holiday photos where I was cropped out of the family portraits, through whispered conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. David appeared at my side, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Madison? What happened?" I looked up at him. This man I'd loved since college, this man who'd promised to stand by me through everything, and saw the familiar flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. Not concern for my bleeding hand or my obvious distress, but embarrassment that his wife was causing a scene at his parents' perfect party. "Just clumsy," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He helped me to my feet, his grip gentle but urgent, already steering me toward the powder room. Away from his mother's audience. Away from the evidence of my latest failure to blend seamlessly into their world. The powder room was a sanctuary of soft lighting and rose-scented air. I ran cold water over my palm, watching the blood swirl down the drain in pink spirals. In the mirror, I looked like a ghost, pale skin, hollow eyes, wearing the navy dress Eleanor had suggested because it's slimming, dear, and draws attention away from, well, you know. The door opened without a knock. Eleanor swept in, her silver hair perfectly styled, her smile sharp as the glass I'd just cleaned up. "Madison, darling, we need to talk." She closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded like a trap snapping shut. The scent of her expensive perfume mixed with the roses, creating something cloying and overwhelming. "I've been patient," she began, her voice losing its public sweetness. 7 years. I've watched you disappoint my son over and over again. 7 years of empty nurseries and broken promises. I pressed the towel harder against my palm, using the pain to stay focused. "Eleanor, No." She held up one perfectly manicured hand. "I'm done pretending this is temporary. You're barren, Madison. It's time we all accepted that fact and moved forward accordingly." The word hit me like a physical blow. Barren. As if I were a field that had failed to yield crops, a vessel that had proven defective. "There are options," she continued, her tone businesslike now. Divorce doesn't have to be messy. David's young enough to start over with someone more suitable. Someone who can give him the family he deserves. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror. A woman who'd spent 7 years shrinking herself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. But tonight, something in that reflection looked different. Harder. And if I refuse? Eleanor's smile turned predatory. Oh, my dear girl. You won't refuse. Because starting tomorrow, you're no longer welcome at family gatherings. No more holidays, no more birthdays, no more anniversaries. You'll find that David's trust fund, the one that pays for that lovely little house of yours, well, family money should stay with family, don't you think? The classical music from the party drifted through the walls, a mockery of elegance, while my world crumbled in a rose-scented powder room. I thought of our mortgage, our car payments, the life we'd built on the foundation of David's family money. Money I'd never wanted to depend on but had been slowly, systematically encouraged to rely on. You have 1 week to make your decision, Eleanor said, smoothing her dress. I trust you'll make the right choice. She turned to leave, then paused with her hand on the doorknob. Oh, and Madison? Clean yourself up before you come back out. You're bleeding on the towels. The door closed with that same soft click, leaving me alone with my reflection and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stared at the woman in the mirror, this stranger who'd let herself be diminished, dismissed, discarded. But as I watched, something shifted in her eyes. Something that had been buried under years of shame and self-doubt began to surface. I thought of the envelope hidden in my jewelry box at home, the one I'd been too afraid to open for 3 months now. The one with the letterhead from the fertility clinic downtown. My phone buzzed against the marble counter. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Grant, this is Dr. Sarah Chun from Metropolitan Fertility. I've been trying to reach you about your test results. Please call me as soon as possible. It's urgent. The towel slipped from my numb fingers, landing on the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly too quiet room. The fertility clinic's waiting room smelled like antiseptic and false hope. I sat in the corner chair, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had gone white, staring at the motivational posters that lined the walls. Miracles happen every day. Your journey starts here. Never give up on your dreams. 3 days had passed since Eleanor's ultimatum. 3 days of David avoiding eye contact over breakfast, of sleeping in separate rooms, of pretending everything was normal while our marriage crumbled around us like stale cake. Dr. Chin emerged from her office, a petite woman with kind eyes and graying temples. She'd been my doctor for 2 years, guiding me through test after test, procedure after procedure, always with gentle optimism that had slowly eroded into professional sympathy. Madison, thank you for coming in. Her voice carried something different today, not the careful neutrality I'd grown accustomed to, but something that made my stomach clench with anticipation. Her office was warm, filled with photos of babies she'd helped bring into the world. I'd stopped looking at them months ago, unable to bear the reminder of what I couldn't have. Today, I forced myself to meet her gaze directly. The blood work we ran 3 months ago, she began, settling behind her desk with a thick file. I'm sorry it took so long to get the complete analysis back. We had to run the tests multiple times to be certain. My heart hammered against my ribs. Certain of what? Dr. Chin opened the file, her fingers tracing over pages of medical jargon that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Madison, you're not infertile. You never were. The words hit me like a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. The room seemed to tilt sideways, the motivational posters blurring into meaningless colors. I don't understand. Your hormone levels, your ovarian function, your reproductive system. Everything is completely normal. More than normal, actually. You have excellent fertility markers for a woman your age. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to anchor myself to something solid. But we've been trying for 7 years. 7 years of nothing. Dr. Chen's expression grew carefully neutral, the way doctors look when they're about to deliver news that will shatter your world. Madison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has David ever been tested? The question hung in the air like smoke. He said he was. Early on. He said everything was fine. Do you have copies of his results? I shook my head slowly, a cold realization creeping up my spine like ice water. He said they were normal. He said the problem was with me. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Madison, male factor infertility accounts for about 40% of all fertility issues. It's incredibly common and completely treatable in most cases. But if David hasn't actually been tested, the room spun around me. 7 years. 7 years of believing I was broken, defective, less than a woman. 7 years of Eleanor's cutting remarks, of David's disappointed sighs, of shrinking myself smaller and smaller until I'd nearly disappeared entirely. I need to see his medical records, I whispered. Dr. Chen nodded. I can't access them without his consent, but Madison, there's something else. Something I discovered when I was reviewing your case file. She pulled out another sheet, this one with David's name at the top. My vision blurred as I tried to focus on the medical terminology. 3 years ago, David came to see my colleague, Dr. Martinez. He was tested for fertility issues. My blood turned to ice. And severe oligospermia with poor motility. In layman's terms, very low sperm count with limited movement. It's treatable, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. He never followed up, never started treatment. And according to Dr. Martinez's notes, he specifically requested that no information be shared with his wife. The motivational posters seem to mock me now. Miracles happen every day, except when your husband lies to you, for 7 years. Your journey starts here, except when you've been walking the wrong path entirely. He knew, I breathed. He knew it was him, and he let me believe. I'm so sorry, Madison. I can't imagine what you're going through right now. But I could barely hear her over the roaring in my ears. Every doctor's appointment I'd attended alone while David worked late. Every invasive procedure I'd endured while he offered hollow comfort. Every time Eleanor had called me Barren while David stood silently by, knowing the truth. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Mom wants to know if you've made your decision yet. The family lawyer is standing by. I stared at the message, something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. The family lawyer. Of course. They'd already planned this out, probably months ago. Maybe years. Dr. Chen, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need copies of everything. David's test results, my test results, all of it. She nodded, already reaching for the printer. Madison, I have to ask, are you safe at home? If you need resources, support. I'm fine. I lied, then caught myself. Actually, no. I'm not fine. But I will be. The papers felt heavy in my hands as I walked to my car, each page a piece of evidence in a case I was only beginning to understand. 7 years of gaslighting. 7 years of systematic emotional abuse disguised as family disappointment. I sat in the parking lot, engine running, staring at the medical records that proved what I'd never dared to hope, that I wasn't broken, that I'd never been broken.
My phone rang.
David's name flashed on the screen. Madison, where are you? You missed dinner with my parents. His voice carried that familiar note of irritation, the tone he used when I'd failed to meet his family's expectations yet again. But tonight, it sounded different. Tonight, I could hear the manipulation beneath the concern. I was at the doctor, I said carefully. A pause. Everything okay? Actually, yes. Everything's perfectly okay. Better than okay, in fact. Another pause, longer this time. What do you mean? I could picture him in our kitchen. The kitchen his family's money had paid for, probably loosening his tie, already planning how to spin whatever I'd learned into another reason why I was the problem. I mean, I got some very interesting test results today. About fertility. About why we haven't been able to conceive. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When David finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Madison, we've been through this. The doctors said I'm perfectly fertile, David. Excellent fertility markers, actually. Funny thing, though, they also had some very interesting information about your visit to Dr. Martinez 3 years ago. I heard his sharp intake of breath, and in that moment I knew. I knew he'd been lying all along. I knew Eleanor knew. I knew this whole elaborate charade of my inadequacy had been orchestrated to cover up his shame. Madison, I can explain.
Can you?
Can you explain why you let me believe for 7 years that I was defective? Can you explain why you sat there while your mother called me Barren? Can you explain why you're threatening to divorce me for a problem that was never mine to begin with? You don't understand the pressure I was under. My family, their expectations. Your family's expectations? My voice rose, months of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. What about me, David? What about my expectations of honesty from my husband? Madison, please just come home. We can work this out. But I was already backing out of the parking space, the medical records on my passenger seat like a roadmap to a future I'd never dared imagine. I am coming home, I said. But not to work anything out. I'm coming home to pack. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking as I drove through the evening traffic. The city lights blurred past my windows, each one a small beacon in the darkness that had been my marriage. When I pulled into our driveway, David's car was already there, along with another vehicle I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see figures moving around, David, Eleanor, and a man in an expensive suit who could only be the family lawyer. They were already dividing up the spoils of my surrender. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I grabbed the medical records and walked toward the house that had never really been mine, ready to face the people who'd spent 7 years convincing me I was worthless. The front door was unlocked. I could hear Eleanor's voice from the living room, sharp and satisfied. Much better this way, really. David can start fresh with someone more suitable. The Patterson girl is still available, and her family has excellent breeding. I stepped into the doorway, and the conversation died. 3 faces turned toward me. David's guilty and pale, Eleanor's coldly triumphant, and the lawyer's professionally neutral. Madison, David started, but I held up my hand.
No.
I'm done listening to you. I looked at Eleanor, this woman who'd spent 7 years systematically destroying my self-worth. And I'm especially done listening to you. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? I pulled out the medical records, holding them up like a shield. Turns out I'm not Barren after all. Turns out your son has been lying to all of us for 7 years about who really has the fertility problem. The color drained from Eleanor's face. The lawyer looked confused, glancing between David and his mother, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. That's impossible, Eleanor said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Is it? I turned to David, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the expensive leather sofa. Tell her, David. Tell your mother about your visit to Dr. Martinez. Tell her about your test results. Tell her why you've been letting me take the blame for something that was never my fault. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps I should leave you to discuss this privately. No, I said firmly.
Stay.
Because I have a feeling we're going to need a lawyer before this conversation is over. Eleanor stood up, her composure cracking for the first time in the 7 years I'd known her. David, what is she talking about? But David couldn't meet his mother's eyes. He stared at his hands, this man who'd built his entire identity on being the golden son, the perfect heir, the one who could do no wrong. It's true, he whispered. The admission hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Eleanor's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and finally, a rage so pure it was almost beautiful to witness. You let me... She began, then stopped, her hand flying to her throat. You let me humiliate myself. You let me blame her when you knew. I was ashamed, David said, finally looking up. I couldn't disappoint you. I couldn't be the one who failed the family line. Eleanor sank back into her chair, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked old, fragile, human. But I felt no sympathy. Not after 7 years of her cruelty. So you decided to destroy me instead, I said quietly. Both of you. You decided it was easier to let me believe I was worthless than to face the truth about your precious family genetics. The lawyer cleared his throat again. Mrs. Grant, if you're considering divorce proceedings, I should mention that given these revelations, the financial arrangements we discussed earlier might need to be reconsidered. Eleanor's head snapped up. What do you mean? Well, if Mrs. Grant can prove that she was systematically deceived about the nature of the fertility issues, and that this deception was used to coerce her into accepting an unfavorable divorce settlement, that could constitute fraud. Emotional abuse. The courts tend to look very unfavorably on that sort of thing. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. The first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Fraud. I repeated, tasting the word. I like the sound of that. David stood up abruptly. Madison, please. We can fix this. We can get treatment. We can try again. Try again? I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. David, you had 7 years to tell me the truth. 7 years to get treatment. 7 years to be a husband instead of a coward. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. The words exploded out of me, 7 years of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. You were protecting your image, your family's reputation, your precious ego. You never once thought about protecting me. Eleanor stood up slowly, her face pale but determined. Madison, I owe you an apology. Do you? I turned to face her, this woman who'd made my life hell for 7 years. Do you really think an apology is going to fix this? I was protecting my son. You were protecting a lie. And you destroyed me to do it. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, the one that had belonged to David's great-grandfather, another piece of family history that I'd never truly been part of. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Grant, this is Jennifer Walsh from Walsh & Associates Family Law. Dr. Chin gave me your number. I specialize in cases involving reproductive coercion and marital fraud. I'd like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. I looked up to find 3 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. For 7 years, I'd been the one who bent, who compromised, who made myself smaller to fit into their world. Not anymore. I want you both out of my house, I said quietly. Madison, this is my house. David started. Actually, the lawyer interrupted, consulting his notes. The house is in both names. And given the circumstances we've just discussed, Mrs. Grant has every right to ask you to leave while she considers her options. David's face flushed red. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I looked at Eleanor, then at David, these people who'd spent 7 years convincing me I was nothing. You have 1 hour to pack whatever you need. After that, I'm changing the locks. Eleanor's composure finally cracked completely. You ungrateful little. Careful, I said softly. Your lawyer is still here. And I have a feeling everything you say from now on is going to matter very much in court. She closed her mouth with an audible snap. I turned to the lawyer, this man who'd come here expecting to oversee my surrender. I'll be needing my own representation. Someone who specializes in cases like this. He nodded slowly, already packing up his briefcase. I think that would be wise, Mrs. Grant. As they filed out of the living room, David to pack, Eleanor to fume, the lawyer to escape, I stood alone in the house that had never felt like home. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt like myself. My phone rang. Jennifer Walsh, the lawyer Dr. Chun had recommended. Mrs. Grant? I know it's late, but I wanted to reach out. Dr. Chun filled me in on your situation. I have to tell you, cases like yours are more common than you might think, and the courts are taking them very seriously these days. What kind of settlement are we talking about? I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Well, that depends on a lot of factors. But given the systematic deception, the emotional abuse, the financial coercion, I'd say you're looking at a very favorable outcome, possibly including spousal support, a significant portion of marital assets, and if we can prove the family was complicit in the deception. She paused, and I could hear papers rustling. Mrs. Grant, how much do you know about the Grant Family Trust? I frowned. Not much. David always said it was complicated family business. I think you and I need to meet first thing tomorrow morning. There are some things about your husband's family finances that I think you're going to find very interesting. After I hung up, I walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time in years. The expensive furniture that Eleanor had chosen. The artwork that reflected David's family's taste, not mine. The photos where I always looked slightly out of place, like a stranger who'd wandered into someone else's life. Tomorrow, I would start building a new life. Tonight, I would sleep in my own bed, in my own house, as my own person for the first time in 7 years. But first, I had a phone call to make. I dialed the number for Dr. Chen's after-hours line, my heart pounding as I waited for her to answer. Dr. Chen? It's Madison Grant. I have a question about fertility treatments. If someone wanted to get pregnant and they had excellent fertility markers like you said, how long would it typically take? Her warm laugh carried through the phone. Madison, with your test results? I'd say you could be pregnant within a few months of trying. 2 years later, I stood in the marble foyer of the Grant family estate, but this time I wasn't the broken woman picking up shattered glass. This time, I held a baby carrier in each arm, and behind me stood Jennifer Walsh, no longer just my divorce attorney, but the woman who'd helped me reclaim everything they'd tried to steal. The twins stirred in their carriers, Emma's tiny fist escaping her blanket, while James made the soft cooing sounds that had become the soundtrack of my new life. At 18 months old, they were perfect. David's dark hair but my green eyes, a combination that had sent Eleanor into stunned silence when the DNA results arrived 6 months ago. Are you ready for this? Jennifer asked, adjusting her briefcase. She'd become more than my lawyer over the past 2 years. She'd become my friend, my advocate, my reminder that I was worth fighting for. I looked through the familiar windows at the party inside. Another Grant family gathering, another celebration where I'd once been the unwelcome guest. But today was different. Today I was here to collect what was rightfully mine. I've been ready for 2 years, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The door opened before we could knock. David stood there, older somehow, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow. The golden boy who'd once commanded every room now looked like a shadow of himself. Madison. His voice cracked on my name. You came. Did you think I wouldn't? I stepped past him into the foyer, the twins' carriers bumping gently against my sides. After everything your family put me through, did you really think I'd miss this? The sound of conversation from the living room died as we entered. 30 members of the Grant family, cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, all turned to stare at the woman they'd written off as Barren, now carrying 2 beautiful children who bore an unmistakable resemblance to their bloodline. Eleanor sat in her usual throne-like chair, but she looked smaller somehow, diminished. The past 2 years had not been kind to her. The scandal of David's lies, the public humiliation of the divorce proceedings, the revelation that she'd systematically abused an innocent woman, it had all taken its toll. Hello, Eleanor, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. She didn't respond, just stared at the babies with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hunger, maybe. Or regret. Madison, David's cousin Rebecca, approached cautiously, the same woman who'd helped me clean up broken glass 2 years ago. The babies are beautiful. Thank you. I smiled at her, remembering her kindness during those dark years. Rebecca, I'd like you to meet Emma and James. Your new cousins. The word cousins rippled through the room like a stone thrown into still water. Because that's what they were, Grant family blood, legitimate heirs to the fortune that Eleanor had tried so hard to protect from my inferior genetics. Jennifer stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering today. As you know, we're here to execute the final terms of the divorce settlement between Madison and David Grant. She opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, pulling out a thick stack of documents. As per the court's ruling in the case of Grant versus Grant, the systematic deception regarding fertility issues, combined with emotional abuse and financial coercion, has resulted in the following judgment. Eleanor finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. You can't prove those children are. Actually, we can. Jennifer produced another set of papers. DNA test results, conducted by 3 independent laboratories. Emma and James Grant are David's biological children, conceived through artificial insemination using donor sperm to overcome David's fertility issues he concealed from his wife for 7 years. The room erupted in whispers. I watched David's face crumble as the truth he'd hidden for so long was laid bare in front of his entire family. Furthermore, Jennifer continued, her voice cutting through the noise, the court has ruled that Mrs. Grant is entitled to 50% of all marital assets, including David's trust fund, the family business holdings, and this estate. What? Eleanor shot to her feet, her composure finally shattering completely. That's impossible. The trust has been in our family for generations. The trust that David accessed repeatedly during his marriage to fund their lifestyle, Jennifer corrected smoothly. The trust that was used as leverage to control and manipulate Mrs. Grant. The trust that, according to its own bylaws, passes to legitimate heirs, which now includes Emma and James. I watched the color drain from Eleanor's face as the implications hit her. Not only had she lost the battle to remove me from the family, but her own actions had ensured that my children she'd never wanted to exist, were now entitled to the Grant fortune. There's more, Jennifer said, consulting her notes. The court has also awarded Mrs. Grant punitive damages for emotional distress, to be paid from the family's liquid assets. The amount is, she paused for effect, $2.7 million. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking, the same clock that had marked time during my humiliation 2 years ago. But now it was counting down to Eleanor's reckoning. David stepped forward, his hands shaking. Madison, please. The children, they're my children too. Can't we work something out? I looked at him. This man who'd shared my bed for 7 years while lying to my face, who'd watched his mother destroy my self-worth while knowing the truth all along. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You're right, David. They're your children. Which is why you'll have supervised visitation rights every other weekend, as outlined in the custody agreement. Supervised, because the court felt that someone who could lie so systematically to his wife might not be the most reliable caregiver. Emma chose that moment to wake up, her green eyes, my eyes, blinking up at the chandelier that had once seemed so intimidating. She gurgled happily, completely unaware that she was at the center of a family dynasty's collapse. She's beautiful, a voice said from across the room. David's Aunt Margaret, a woman who'd barely acknowledged my existence during my marriage, was staring at Emma with undisguised wonder. She has the Grant chin. And my eyes, I said pointedly. Funny how genetics work, isn't it? All those years Eleanor worried about inferior bloodlines, and it turns out the problem was never with my genes at all. Eleanor sank back into her chair, looking every one of her 73 years. I was protecting my family, she whispered. No, I said, walking closer to her, the twins' carriers steady in my arms. You were protecting your pride. You were so terrified of admitting that your perfect son might be flawed that you destroyed an innocent woman instead. I knelt down so we were eye level, close enough to see the tears she was trying so hard not to shed. Do you want to know the really tragic part, Eleanor? If you'd just been honest from the beginning, if you'd supported us through David's fertility treatments, these children could have been born years ago. You could have been their loving grandmother instead of the woman who tried to erase their mother from existence. A tear finally escaped, rolling down her powdered cheek. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back 7 years of my life. Sorry doesn't undo the damage you did to my self-worth. Sorry doesn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep believing I was worthless. I stood up, adjusting the carriers. James was stirring now too, his dark hair catching the light from the chandelier. However, I continued, my voice softening slightly, these children deserve to know their family. All of their family. So here's what's going to happen. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person who'd witnessed my humiliation and was now witnessing my vindication. I'm moving back to the city. I've bought a house, A beautiful house with a big yard where Emma and James can grow up happy and loved. David will have his visitation rights, assuming he can prove he's committed to being an honest father. I turned back to Eleanor. And you, Eleanor, will have the opportunity to be their grandmother. But only if you can prove you've learned from your mistakes. Only if you can treat me with the respect I should have received from day one. Eleanor nodded frantically. Yes, yes, of course. Anything. I'm not finished. My voice hardened again. You will publicly apologize for your treatment of me. You will make it clear to everyone in your social circle that I was never the problem. You will acknowledge that your son lied and that you participated in that lie. Eleanor's face went pale, but she nodded again. And I continued. You will establish a trust fund for Emma and James, separate from the family trust, to ensure their financial security regardless of any future family drama. Jennifer stepped forward with another document. The amount we discussed was $5 million to be held in trust until the children reached 25. Eleanor's mouth fell open. $5 million is a small price to pay for trying to destroy someone's life, I finished. Consider it an investment in your grandchildren's future and in your own redemption. The room was silent except for the soft sounds the twins were making as they began to fuss. It was getting close to feeding time, and I had a life to get back to, a real life, built on truth instead of lies. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my purse. I pulled out a small velvet box and set it on the coffee table in front of Eleanor. My wedding ring. I thought you might want it back, since family heirlooms should stay with the family. Eleanor stared at the box, as if it contained a snake. I won't be needing it anymore, I continued. I'm engaged to someone else. Someone who's honest, kind, and who loves me exactly as I am. Someone who was there for me during the pregnancy, during the birth, during every moment that David should have been there for but wasn't. David's face went white. Engaged. His name is Michael. He's a pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital. We met when I went back to work after the divorce. I smiled, thinking of the man who'd helped me rebuild my life from the ground up. He's wonderful with the twins. They already call him Papa Mike. The final blow landed exactly as I'd intended. David staggered backward as if I'd physically struck him. You're replacing me, he whispered. No, David. I'm moving on. There's a difference. Jennifer cleared her throat. If we could finish the legal proceedings? Mrs. Grant has a plane to catch. A plane? Eleanor asked weakly. We're going to Hawaii for 2 weeks. Michael's never been, and I thought it would be nice to take the twins somewhere beautiful for their first real vacation. I adjusted Emma's blanket as she began to fuss more insistently. Don't worry, we'll be back in time for David's first supervised visit. As Jennifer finished reading through the settlement terms, I looked around the room one last time. These people who'd made me feel so small, so worthless, so broken, they looked smaller now themselves. Diminished by their own cruelty, reduced by their own lies. But I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. I felt only relief that it was finally over. Madison. Rebecca approached as we prepared to leave. I'm sorry. I should have said something. Should have stood up for you. You were kind to me when no one else was, I interrupted. That matters more than you know. She smiled sadly. Will you let me be part of their lives? I'd like to be a real aunt to them. I considered her request, this woman who'd shown me the only genuine kindness I'd received in this house. Call me next week. We'll arrange something. As we walked toward the door, Eleanor's voice stopped me. Madison, wait. I turned back to see her struggling to her feet, her face streaked with tears she was no longer trying to hide. I know you have no reason to forgive me, she said, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve it. But please don't let my mistakes cost me the chance to know my grandchildren. For a moment, I saw not the woman who'd tormented me for 7 years, but a broken old lady who'd lost everything because of her own pride and prejudice. A woman who was finally facing the consequences of her choices. Eleanor, I said softly, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you receive when you're truly ready to change. When you're ready to be the grandmother Emma and James deserve, call me. I walked out of the Grant family estate for the last time, My children in my arms and my future stretching bright and clear ahead of me. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of voices as the family tried to process what had just happened. In the car, Jennifer buckled her seatbelt and turned to me with a grin. "How does it feel?" I looked back at the twins, now sleeping peacefully in their car seats, then at the mansion growing smaller in the rearview mirror. "It feels like justice," I said. "But more than that, it feels like freedom." My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How did it go?" "The kids and I are waiting at the airport. Emma's bottle is ready and James's favorite blanket is packed. Can't wait to start our vacation. Love you." I smiled, typing back. "It went perfectly. On my way to you now. To our future." As we drove away from the grand estate, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, broken, defeated, convinced she was worthless. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew her own value, someone who would never again let anyone make her feel small. The twins stirred in their sleep, and I reached back to touch Emma's tiny hand. These children would grow up knowing they were wanted, loved, valued for exactly who they were. They would never doubt their worth the way I had. And someday, when they were old enough to understand, I would tell them the story of how their mother learned to fight for herself. How she discovered that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemies, but in refusing to let them destroy you. The airport came into view, and I could see Michael waiting by the departure gate, his face lighting up when he spotted our car. This man who'd loved me through my healing, who'd been there for every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every moment of joy and fear that came with raising twins. This man who'd never once made me feel like I needed to be anyone other than exactly who I was. As I lifted the twins from their car seats and walked toward the man I loved, toward the vacation that would be our first as a real family, I felt the last chains of my past finally fall away. Eleanor Grant had called me barren, but she'd been wrong about everything. I wasn't barren. I was fertile ground for a new life, a better life, a life built on truth and love and the unshakable knowledge that I was enough. I was more than enough. I was everything.